maintaining blood pressure is quite complex when you start looking into it. It's not as simple as saying, oh, the vessels do it, or oh, the heart does it. It's a complex inner working between the heart, the blood vessels, the brain, the kidneys, throw in some endocrine. There's a lot of factors that go into it. And amongst all these things working together, there's also multiple ways the blood vessels themselves will help out this process. But there are three main things that will impact or influence blood pressure. You have your cardiac output. Remember, cardiac output we talked about in the heart. Cardiac output is heart rate times stroke volume. Remember, stroke volume is dealing with end diastolic minus end systolic volume. We have peripheral resistance. We've mentioned that over the past couple of videos. And then blood volume. Basically, the more blood volume you have, the more pressure can be exerted, or the lower the blood volume, the less pressure exerted. Now, to look at these in a more mathematical sense, we have this flow equals pressure over resistance. Well, that pretty much is the same as this one. Cardiac output equals pressure over resistance. Well, if you think about it, blood flow is simply the amount of blood passing a point per minute. Cardiac output, the amount of blood going into the aorta per minute. Same thing. But now let's take and do a little of algebra and rearrange these, and we get this. Pressure equals cardiac output times resistance. Same thing as the other two, just different way of looking at it. So if we take this, and now we're going to kind of just break it down, really, what does it mean? We know we say pressure is the starting point. So we'll start with pressure. Pressure equals cardiac output. Well, we said cardiac output is the same thing as heart rate times stroke volume. So we have heart rate times stroke volume. Now multiply that by your resistance. But we can break it down even further. We can say that pressure equals, we still have heart rate, times, well, instead of stroke volume, we now have the end diastolic volume, minus the end systolic volume, times resistance. So it's really showing you that pressure has a lot of things going into it. We have pressure having the heart rate, end diastolic volume, end systolic volume, and resistance. All are playing a part in this pressure generation. So it's kind of important to understand what really goes into this, to understand all the variables and how complex this whole process is. Because there's a lot of parts and pieces that all add together. And thinking back to the heart lecture, how many different things impacted end diastolic volume? How many different things impacted end systolic volume? How many things impact heart rate? So a lot of parts and pieces all working together to maintain blood pressure. But really, blood pressure is going to vary directly with cardiac output, resistance, and blood volume. They're all working together. They're all having a part here. So changes in one variable. So let's say cardiac output goes up. Well, you can modify by reducing resistance, for example. But all these can go back and forth. Your body is meant and trying to maintain a certain blood pressure when you're at rest. It's trying to maintain a certain blood pressure. So if any of these change, blood volume, cardiac output, resistance, those all can be quickly modified. Now, this blood volume can very easily be translated to blood pressure because you increase blood volume, you increase blood pressure if nothing else is changing. So that's why a lot of times you'll say, well, if one variable changes and nothing else changes, what happens? Because normally, if one variable changes, the other variables compensate to maintain that homeostatic level. So cardiac output is determined by venous return, neural, and hormonal controls. So both the nervous system and the endocrine system are playing a part in how this is working. If you're trying to remember, okay, what's cardiac output? How does that work? There's a whole section back in the heart unit that goes through cardiac output. But the resting heart rate is primarily maintained by vagal tone, the vagus nerve, parasympathetic. It's maintaining that nice resting heart rate. Stroke volume, we've already said, is end diastolic volume minus end systolic volume. So stroke volume is a lot of times controlled by the venous return. Venous return, or your preload, is your end diastolic volume. How much is in that ventricle just before it starts to contract? Now looking at cardiac output during stress. So that means either you're emotionally stressed or you're physically stressed, as in you're exercising, you're working out. In this case, the cardiocirculatory center increases heart rate. It increases stroke volume, all because of the sympathetic nervous system. What that does is it causes the end systolic volume, ESV, to get lower because there's more contractility, less blood is left in the heart after contraction. What that also does then is the mean arterial pressure is increasing. So ESV dropped, MAP increases. This is all because of the sympathetic innervation due to a stressful situation, either emotional or physical stress. All right, a little bit of a summary here. There's a lot here. Let's go through it piecemeal. So first off, we'll take exercise. When you exercise and your heart rate increases, you now have activated the respiratory pump. You've activated the skeletal muscle pump. You've increased your sympathetic activity. Well, all of that increases the venous return. Now, I've already mentioned if you increase venous return or you increase preload, you increase your end diastolic volume. Increasing the end diastolic volume means there's more blood to start with before the heart starts to beat, or contract, you should say, which increases stroke volume. Increased stroke volume increases cardiac output, which is good because if you're exercising, you need more blood flow going to the muscles and your organs. All right, next one over here is a drop in blood pressure. A drop in blood pressure can be picked up in the medulla. You're going to have sensors and cardiac centers that are saying, hey, there's a problem here. We're low on blood pressure. This will do two things. It'll decrease parasympathetic activity, basically inhibits the parasympathetic. It'll also then stimulate or increase sympathetic activity. By increasing sympathetic, you're going to have a couple different things here. One, you can see it directly goes down here. You increase heart rate. So sympathetic has a direct relation to increasing heart rate. Two, you increase the contractility of the cardiac muscle. So the cardiac muscle contracts stronger. By contracting stronger, you then have a drop in end systolic volume, ESV. That means there's less blood left in the ventricle after contraction. If there's less blood in the ventricle after contraction, that means your stroke volume went up. Increased stroke volume, increased cardiac output. And the third way, this one right here, is you directly have a link by epinephrine to heart rate. So increased sympathetic activity increases the epinephrine in the blood, which increases heart rate. So that means there's a dual factor right here. Two different ways of increasing heart rate because of sympathetic activity. Overall, though, the ultimate goal, you've increased cardiac activity, either by exercise, stimulus there, or a drop in blood pressure. You're saying, well, all this because of a drop in blood pressure? Yeah, because your heart's trying to increase blood pressure back up. You don't want blood pressure being below your homeostatic balance. So a bit about trying to maintain blood pressure. A lot of factors go into it, a lot of parts and pieces. From this unit, as well as back to the heart, going back to the nervous, and even the endocrine. And even pull a little bit of renal in here, we have to still get to it in the future.